Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me in this Mind Mastery video. Today I wanted to talk about idealism, both in more philosophical sense and what it means for us in a more practical sense. So we know that when we define something as idealistic, there could be at least two definitions to this description. One would be the more common sense, if you like, which would describe something that aims to be perfect, something that is not very realistic in an immediate sense, not in a general sense. It might be realistic in the long term, but in the immediate sense, in the immediate time, it's not very realistic. So that's one definition. And from a philosophical sense, idealism is a deeply set conviction that consciousness or the mind itself is more valuable than the material world. Or sometimes some philosophers even take this idea to an extreme and say that the consciousness or the mind originates the material reality. So that could be explained in a way that you can't really prove that the material reality exists because whatever we perceive is filtered through our mind. So your perception, your sensory data, whatever you pick up from the environment goes through your mind. So if you take the mind away, if there would be no mind, if there would be no consciousness, can you prove that the material reality would still exist? I've been actually talking at this idea at length in my book when I've described the fact that you can't really reach an ultimate objective perception. Even if we do develop all these scientific measurements, computers, external tools that can help us to be as objective as we can, 100% objectivity is really difficult to achieve, if not even impossible, because whatever we create has originated in our mind. So we collect all this data from our reality, from our experiences, and from what we perceive, and we try to create something that is removed as far as possible from our subjective experience. But even this doesn't guarantee that we can be objective, because whatever we've created has came from our mind. So the best we can hope for is to be as objective as possible. And this occurs when we try to focus on facts, on scientific evidence, for instance. And generally we try to describe the phenomena in a way that is removed from our belief system, from our subjective opinions, from our emotions, and everything else that arises through our subjective experience. But again, it doesn't resolve the problem of idealism, because I think that in a sense what idealists say is a problem. At the moment, as far as I know, we can't resolve this problem of the mind itself, of consciousness, and the fact that it seems to be the center of all phenomena that we can observe. The very fact that you can observe something is possible because you have your mind and that you are conscious. Now, even more extreme variation of this idea is what has been proposed by solipsists, centuries ago, who stated that, which is quite logical idea as well, who stated that you can't prove that other minds exist apart of your own. You think, therefore you are. But whether other people have a mind or have the same mind as yours, or that they are conscious, or that anything at all happens outside of yourself objectively, cannot be proved. And at the end of the day, all that you might experience is just like a dream or a hallucination, or simply an idea about the world rather than the experience itself. Now, all these theories and ideas about ourselves and the world sound very cool and appealing, but what does it all mean to us in more practical terms, like how can we use it in everyday life? I mean, you can try to live by, ideology of solipsist, but does it help you to, manage your life on a day-to-day basis? Does it help you to create valuable relationships with others when you don't believe that they have a mind in the first place? And so on and on. So as we can see, this philosophical theory is not very practical. Now we know that many people are very idealistic, and to be idealistic in a practical sense means to have this idea on how the reality might be or could be, how people could be in a very abstract sense. So as an idealist, you might develop this internal value system, different ideas about yourself and the reality around you and other people. Now, as an idealist, there are pros and cons of following this method of relating to reality, understanding reality, and dealing with other people and day-to-day life. Starting from a negative side, you're gonna get disappointed and perhaps hurt, because as an idealist, you have this perfect idea of how the world should be, how you want it to be, and how it should work in the best possible case scenario. And when you come in contact with the reality and other people, you will notice that the world itself and how everything works and how other people are, they not always match your idealistic version of how the world is. On a more positive side, however, idealists are often these visionary people that offer the ideas to the world so that the world can, in a way, change in order to accommodate this idealistic version of reality and how things are and how things could be. To understand it better, we can compare this way of life, because I think it is a way of life in a sense. The very contrast to idealism is materialism. Now, materialism is a belief system revolving about the importance of the material world. So someone who is materialist believes that what truly matters in life are your possessions, what you can experience directly through your senses, what you can observe, for instance, or what you can hear, what you can touch and smell. And materialists usually dismiss this idealistic ideas that there could be something different, that the reality could be interpreted in a different way. Because for the materialists, what matters is what is truly here and now, what they can observe and perceive through their senses. So as we can see, the idealist is guided in their life through these abstract ideas about the reality. And he believes, or she believes, that there is much more to what they can perceive directly through their senses. There might be, the belief that there might be different interpretations of the reality, that they believe that the mind itself is very important, and perhaps that none of the material world really matters at the end. Now, I think that both ideologies, both extremes, the materialism and idealism, are valuable, because if you go into an extreme of either of these philosophies and ways of life, you're gonna miss at least the half of the whole picture. Because if you go into an extreme of idealism, let's say, then you might seem, neglectful, in a way, perhaps even irresponsible about your day-to-day life, because you'll believe in these abstract ideas of what's going on, what could be, what possibilities they are. And you might interpret the reality as if your actions didn't have proper consequences for the future. So you might end up in a place where you might, struggle to pay your bills, perhaps be neglectful of whether you clean your house or not. Perhaps you might even struggle to develop relationships with other people because they don't meet your idealistic agenda, as I would like to call it. But then if you go into another extreme of materialism, that might not be very fulfilling either, because what you're going to do? You're going to go to work, you're going to make some money, you're going to buy, I don't know, various material things, you can buy a new house, and that's it really. What else there is to materialism other than your material possessions and what is in front of you and what you can touch? So, as we can see, going into either of the extremes might place you in a position of unhappiness and perhaps difficult circumstances as well. Now, let's say that you are on either of these extremes, that you are either highly idealistic or highly materialistic. Can you do anything to change these circumstances? I mean, are you happy the way you are? Because if you are happy, then fine, that's great. Perhaps you enjoy just buying stuff and take pleasure in your material possessions, despite the fact that they are not going to be fulfilling in the long term, simply because there's a process called hedonic adaptation, which means that whatever gives you a boost of happiness, be it buying a new thing, a new gadget, or going on holidays, it might seem like you are extremely happy and you might feel very satisfied and fulfilled, but soon after that you're gonna fall back to your basic level of happiness and satisfaction. So what happens is that many people will try to buy more stuff, more things, more gadgets, and so on and on to fill this void because they cannot tolerate the low level of happiness and satisfaction. Now, on the other hand, as an idealist, you might be unhappy because your experience of the reality might be entirely different to what you imagine it could be. So, if you follow idealism to an extreme, you are bound to get, constantly disappointed and hurt because the reality itself doesn't match your belief of the reality. So I think that in order to achieve the balance between those two, and without entirely dismissing either of the philosophies, as an idealist, you could try to become a bit more grounded and try to observe facts and consider facts and take these facts and what you observe, what you experience into consideration, rather than trying to fit the reality into your model of the reality. And as a materialist, perhaps you would like to consider different possibilities about how the reality could be, how perhaps your interpretation of the reality could be wrong, and there might be much more to it than you could ever imagine. So I think that's all I had to say for today. I hope to see you next week. I'm going to record some questions and answers. And if you're looking for some advice, then I'm available for coaching and counseling, and you can find more about it on my website. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.